Okay.
Hi, this is Mike Knezovich, your host for Tune Up with Mike and Monty, Thinking and Feeling Good. I'm here with esteemed psychiatrist Dr. Monty Pavuluri. Good morning, Monty.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Each podcast we get together to talk about what we can do, we being the collective we, do to maintain our happiness and resilience across our lifespans, which is a tall task, but it's doable. This week we're going to talk about parenting, specifically about problems parents may encounter communicating with kids, which I think most parents have, and some ideas about how to work through those problems. I know that I've talked with Monty and I've read her blog, and she's got a couple of approaches that I'm particularly interested in. One of them, as a journalist, is what she calls storytelling, and it's a very simple approach, but I think one that is really worthwhile. Can you tell us a little more about that and how you came to that?
Storytelling is a fascinating subject. Recently, in fact, Mike, we saw an article in the Time magazine about storytelling, even between the couples, how we should be able to talk to each other, telling positive stories with positive framework rather than talking about the schedules, children, and work. That
Right.
we are so kind of restricted, going like some kind of a little rat on a wheel, So I've been actually thinking about storytelling even when I'm taking walks with my husband in these summer balmy evenings. How can I tell a story that would kind of entertain my husband? That's kind of brings his spirits up, especially when you're in a long relationship where everything is already spoken of in 100 different ways, 100 different times. You're always finding ways to entertain.
And you can assume that you've already talked about this stuff, but maybe you haven't in the course of constructing the story.
Also, I think that this article in Wall Street Journal, which I'm so enamored with to kind of reinvigorate my own life, is that we talk about stories of what has happened in the past, present, and future.
Now you talk about...
Sorry, Mike.
No, go ahead.
So with the parenting aspect, the same thing applies with the children, right?
Right.
So my main problem with kids walking in my office in summer, they're doing so many things. They're in the camps, they're visiting aunts, uncles, grandparents. But then they come and say, I ask them, how are you doing, my darling? I mean, so they say, oh, nothing. Or, well, not much really. Or, oh, just been to California. So then I ask next question is, could you tell me in 2 paragraphs about what the content of exactly what you did? Like almost like them thinking like in sentences like text, so that they would be able to pull themselves together to actually produce some content for me, so I can understand what they actually did. And so it becomes like a common funny thing with all my families who come to see me, is as they approach and park their car, their parents would say, oh, Dr. Pavuluri is going to ask you about the 2 paragraphs. You just better be ready, So, but then I haven't really been too successful with at least half of my family, kids who don't necessarily volunteer information. So I studied some of this, through research as well. And what we found was there is a macro structure and micro structure in conversations. And macro structure... Are
you talking about how the brain organizes it?
Yeah, organizes the content, the paragraphs
of
speech, right? The macro, basically, a lot of people wrote about it. This is about executive function, production of speech. What are the main...
For me, executive function is a broad category of brain function.
Right.
Okay.
It's in this particular language production, I would think that organizing your thoughts, the big ideas and small ideas, and put them together.
And forming a hierarchy.
Yeah, and not necessarily intuitive, concretely, but intuitively not missing the big picture. And being able to give the details. And giving me the gist of everything, So that is what a story would consist of.
Okay.
There is a introduction, there is a middle, and there is a kind of a finishing off sentences, right? So you kind of lead the children very often in storytelling or story listening. Oh, tell me about where you've been. So they will reflect the situation.
So in some ways, if I'm a parent, what really is critical is how I frame my question.
Yes, to get them to talk.
Yeah. So you have to find ways to say, tell me a story, rather than like, what'd you do today?
Yeah. You're creating a circumference to the conversation.
Okay.
And then again, though, they won't organize themselves to give the story sometimes, right?
Right.
That's why they say, oh my God, I don't want to talk about it or something.
Especially to my parents.
Exactly. I mean, with me, sometimes they have so much difference and reverence that they kind of are sort of very shy. So you want to pull them out of their shell too, right?
Yeah, because you're a professional, and then I'm at the doctor's office.
Yeah, all that. So it's almost like you want to get them out of the groove and then make them feel comfortable and just get them to talk about something very small and simple and, talk about their strengths and, their what is so apparent and awesome about them.
Yeah.
And then they build their confidence and start to open up a little bit. And you might even want to talk about some mundane things like, see, for example, today all the kids are going out and catching Pokemons everywhere, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of an interesting thing. Everybody's laughing out loud about these catching Pokemons. So everybody's telling me about them if I ask about it. And if I ask something silly like that or something interesting like that, then they would start to feel, oh yeah, we are on the common ground. And then they start to open up a little bit more about other things.
Now, on your blog, you have some really kind of concrete little things that you put under sort of tips for scaffolding conversations, is the way you put it. And I think that's a great term, where you build one level and then another level. And you start with really simple questions, and you try to sort of not be formal, like what are you looking at, buddy? It's more specific. It makes it easier to answer a question.
Sure. So a lot of the time, you ask. Scaffolding means you build on a certain structure. You ask a question about, say, what. Where you've been, and
it's specific, so it's easy to answer.
And then what did you do? Now, the why questions are very difficult for young children.
Why?
The what would be easier. It's kind of a subtle difference, but
it's a big one.
Big one, yeah. So when you ask about what did you do, then they'll think about concrete things. Then you don't want to be like condescending, like tell us about it. Almost it's not condescending, but it's almost like inquiry. It shouldn't be like an inquiry, but it should be a two-way communication, right? I mean, and then adding value, commenting on what they say, building them up with self-confidence as they're saying, and being very curious.
Yeah. That's very good. And the thing about the about or the what versus a why, that makes a lot of sense. Why requires some different level of thinking. And there's another thing that I found really interesting in your blog, which is the way I took it is, don't treat this as like something you win or lose as a parent. If they still resist conversation, you don't. It's not about you.
Yeah, and I think that, a lot of people want to niggle. So there's no need to. Because you know what? Children have equal responsibility. I mean, you have done your part, and then you come back to it a little bit later. You don't want to just go on and on with them until they feel they want to dig their heels in. Sometimes kids can resist,
So kind of like fight another day. Just say, okay, you don't want to. If it's cool, you don't want to talk to me today. That's all right. But
you don't even want to say that sentence. You don't want to be talking to me tonight. It's all right. You might want to. I mean, it's a very subtle. You want to say, oh, so for example, sometimes my kids come in and say, hey, how did your day go? It's fine. And then they go home, walk into their room. And you know what? I want to say, how did the test go today? Or you want to ask about, something specific about something he's done that's interesting. Even then, sometimes they're not in a mood, they're tired. So I just say, let go.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, see you, sweetheart, and just leave it like that.
And in a sense, that's just respecting their space.
Yeah, respecting their space and respecting them even in the conversation, like sometimes even if you respect till cows come home as a parent, they don't see the respect in your conversation.
Right.
Yeah, they just kind of dismiss you sometimes because you're so familiar and intimate. I mean, you teach them the values. Sometimes they do, but there are always times and pockets where they don't. So letting go of those times and rebooting and reconnecting and being the best you can be and keep going.
Another technique, and I think this is more, but it could be for any age, I think, it just would be the activity where you just simply do something. It's like you have this external thing that you're both engaged in, and you're either learning it together or you're helping direct your child playing with Lego, or maybe it would be, as an older person, it's when they're learning to drive, although that's another terrifying subject. But can you talk a little bit about how you can use that as just
absolutely depending upon the age of the child, connecting. Basically, it is about connecting. You connect when you go with your son to Starbucks and buy him a milkshake while you buy a coffee. I often do that. If they're boys, I want the dad to kind of do those things, almost like a homework to dads as a chore. A little walk,
Sure.
a little something fixing in the garage or something that the guys can do together. In the same way, the girl, very often mothers tell me they went out with the girls to pedicure, manicure, or, just go kind of cook something together. I mean, not that I'm just making a sexist kind of like parsing out in a bucket list, but it seems to be intuitively some people are interested in some things, basically. And so I think pairing with the parents and of course with each, across gender as well, and with mom with sons or dads with daughters and the other way around, it's all good combinations at different times, one-to-one times, connecting, playing chess, or playing with Legos, as you said. All of them are really good because directly talking about stuff is sometimes hard.
Yeah, but you're spending time that's committed to one another on this outside thing, which is probably valuable in itself.
Yeah, sometimes you may get to talk about the stories, sometimes you don't, but still it's adding value to the bucket of love and connection.
And I guess a lot of this is consistency too.
Consistency. And you know what? That's an interesting word, Mike. Consistency is something inconsistently consistent.
I know what you mean.
So what technique, with more years of working as a psychiatrist and as a mother as well, the one technique that works one day may not be the same technique that works the other day. But in your spirit, if you respect them and appreciate them and are committed to using various techniques to kind of engage them, it's very good. The consistency is in your spirit and values rather than the actual concrete ways of wielding the problems.
That's maybe the most important thing, isn't it?
I think so.
You love and empathy, and you continue to show that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most important thing, as I always say, is empathy and an authoritative understanding of the topic, and being able to explain and rationally tell your children what to do and how to do time to time. As you're explaining them to even how to tell the story. You can role model them. You can talk to them about it in detail and educate them about how to share and add value through storytelling and add fun, be a role model. You can do a lot of these actively as a coach, as a parent. But what I feel, Mike, is that you don't want to do it every day, right? It becomes pale, boring, irritating.
It's robotic.
But yeah, robotic. You do it like once in 6 months, or you can kind of ask them for stories in between, or you can tell them stories. It's just all in a day's work, you know?
Well, As always, this has been really fun and instructive, and I hope it's been useful to our audience. It has to me anyway.
Thank you, Mike. And I hope that now all our audience would actually practice storytelling with their girlfriends, boyfriends, men, women, friends in general, or with your children, and get others to tell you stories as well, and celebrate storytelling because it's one fun way to live.
Yep. Thanks, Doctor.